president of LAI and member of the LAI Phoenix chapter. It's my great pleasure to welcome you today to our webinar about one of the most interesting and largest land transactions in our state. We're very privileged to have Mark Edelman from the Arizona State Land Department, who's the Director of Planning and Engineering, and Alan Stephenson from the City of Phoenix, who is the Planning and Development Director. They're going to be speaking with us today regarding one of the largest transactions that's just recently occurred of state land in our state. Before we get started, I just want to briefly thank everybody for coming today. I want to thank in particular Harold Barnett. Harold is actually a member of the Ely chapter out of Chicago, but he's starting to spend, for some reason, a few months here in sunny Arizona during the winter months. And welcome, Harold, to our broadcast today. That is one of the benefits of being a member of LAI, is we have 30 chapters all over the world. And thanks to Zoom and other technologies that we have now, you can stay connected with all of our chapters and learn about all kinds of issues relating to land economics throughout the world. So without any further ado, I want to thank everybody for coming today. I'll be monitoring the chat section. So if you have any questions that you have for our presenters, please put your questions in the chat section. You'll find that at the bottom of your screen. And after the presentation, we'll answer those questions. So thanks again for everybody for coming. And at this point in time, I'm going to turn it over to Mark. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Sheila. Let me go ahead and get my screen shared here. There we go. And just to confirm that I am presenting.
Yep.
Great. Okay, excellent. So thank you all for inviting us here today. On behalf of myself and my colleague, Alan Stephenson from the City of Phoenix, we're very glad to be here and present this, this really exciting project to you all that we call the North Phoenix 3500. Whoops. So the way we're going to go through the presentation, I'm going to give a little bit of background on state trust land. Then I'm going to turn it over to Alan, and he's going to talk about the case and some of the background. We're going to finish with, I'm going to tell you about the auction that we held last week, and then we're going to do some Q&A. So first off, I'm going to talk about, in my presentation, what is state trust land? Why is the Arizona State Land Department different from other government land agencies? How do we support economic growth and development in Arizona? And how do we do this through the use of flexible entitlements such as the ones we used here? So first off, state trust land. This is land that was granted to Arizona by the federal government to support our schools and public institutions. And the land was granted to us in two tranches. First, when we became a territory in 1863. And second, when we became a state in 1912. And in the middle there of the screen, you see a typical township of 36 sections. We were granted 4 sections per township. The most important thing to know about state trust land is that we are not public land. Our land is held in trust, and so that makes us very different from public lands that people are familiar with, such as the Forest Service or the Bureau of Land Management. Really, when you think about state trust land, you have to think of us more in terms of private land. So basic history of state land in general is that beginning with, as the United States expanded westward and left the original 13 colonies crossing the Ohio River, when Ohio became a state in 1803, it was granted 1 section per township. And this was section 16, and most states, people refer to this as the school section. And this is a list, this is a table of all the states that came into the Union, and it's not showing you this because I want you to memorize what I have on the screen here, but really to note that we have 100 years of history here of the westward expansion. And as you go from top to bottom, you'll notice that the number of sections that were granted to each state increases, and the acreage increased as you went through. As you move west, you get more into the arid lands of the west, where presumably you would need more land to support agriculture or ranching. But the other thing that happened with this was that over that course of that 100 years, there was a great deal of what I refer to as frontier malfeasance. So not every state did the best job with their grant. In some cases, they were sold off almost immediately. In other cases, the land became involved in complicated land schemes or things that would end up with the state essentially, or the schools having no land to speak of. So if you go back, and I'm not going to name out states by name, but if you were to go to some of these states and say, show me where those millions of acres are that you were granted by the federal government, they wouldn't have it to show you. As you compare the state trusts in the West, because we really are the largest state trusts, this chart is showing the relative size of the different state trusts and the composition, how they make their money. So you'll notice that New Mexico there in the upper left-hand corner generally has the largest revenue, and that's because New Mexico sits on top of the Permian Basin, so they have a lot of oil and gas royalties and revenue coming in. And then you move down. But if you notice Arizona, our pie is the second largest up there in the upper right, but you'll also notice that the dominant color in our pie is red. And if you can read the chart at the bottom, what that tells you is that the bulk of our income in Arizona is coming from commercial land sales. And so if you look at the other states, New Mexico and Wyoming, you see a lot of minerals. Washington and Idaho and Oregon, you see a lot of timber, the green colors. And so Arizona is unique among all the state trusts in that the bulk of our revenue comes from, the land is there. It's not that the land has minerals or anything on it besides it's just land. And so we sell it, we lease it, and that's how we make our money. This map is showing you the distribution of the 9.2 million acres that we still have in our inventory out of our original 10.5. And so you can see we're distributed across the state, blocked up in some areas, checkerboarded in others. In other areas, we're blank. And compare that to the overall surface management responsibility for the state of Arizona. So with state trust land being the blue, you see our slice of the pie is about 13% of the surface land area in Arizona. Private land in Arizona makes up about 17%. And so those two slices together, that 30%, that's the land that Arizona has to grow and develop on. The balance of the land in Arizona is held by the federal government. It's in Indian trust, or it's in other uses such as military or wildlife refuges. So again, we take our responsibility here at the Land Department very seriously that we are Arizona's growth and development for the future. Every acre in our inventory has a designated beneficiary. So we have a parcel viewer map on our website, and if you were to go to it and pick on a parcel, it would tell you, you could find out who the beneficiary is. Now, when people say, Mark, who's the beneficiary on that piece of land? I always answer schools, because I'm 83% likely to be correct. Because 83% of our land is dedicated to the K-12 public schools of the state of Arizona. Now, in addition to that, that's our prime beneficiary. We also have 12 other institutional beneficiaries that include our public universities, our Department of Corrections, our Pioneers Home, and then I have a chart here that will show you, this is the entire portfolio. And so you see there's that 83%, that big blue part of the pie. That's our schools, and then the rest of it goes all the way down there through the other beneficiaries. Some of those University of Arizona, everybody recognizes, but then someone will say, well, where's ASU? Where's NAU? They're in there in the normal schools, the A&M colleges, School of Mines, a lot of those things that were established at the outset of the state are now schools within those universities. So the names that you see on our beneficiary list may not match to what we know them as today, but they are still all here and they are still receiving the benefit of this land. So a lot of people ask us, well, what do you do with all that money that you earn? Because they'll hear about like this sale, $89 million. Every dollar we make goes back to the trust. We are a general fund agency. So we give all of the money we earn every year to the state treasurer, and then we go to the legislature like most other agencies do, and we request an annual appropriation. And so I can tell you that our annual appropriation is usually somewhere in the neighborhood of 18 to $20 million. We have a staff of about 100 here at the land department. Counting myself, there are 3 planners and 3 engineers for the entire state. So that means we have limited resources, and that means that in order to get a lot of things done, we rely on partnerships such as this one with the city of Phoenix to get our land planning and to do our job for our beneficiaries. I mentioned before that we were Arizona state number 48. So they took all the Congress took all the things that happened with all the states that came before us from Ohio up to number 48, and all those things got put into the State Enabling Act, the state constitution, the state statutes, and all of our rules. And so we have some pretty stringent rules. All of our land is held in trust. We are a fiduciary. We have a duty to manage that land for maximum return in perpetuity, not just for today. We cannot sell our land for less than fair market value, and that's determined by a commercial appraisal. Any land sales or leases in excess of 10 years have to go to auction, public auction, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And we cannot mortgage or encumber our land in any way. That means we cannot form community facilities districts on our land. We can't agree to do payback agreements unless they are something that only takes effect after we've sold the land. So we have some pretty tough rules, and that means that we don't have any money or the ability to build infrastructure on our land. Again, we're relying on partnerships to get this done. We also have some significant court rulings that affect the way we do business. One of them came in 1967, and that was Lassen versus Arizona Highway Department. And we used to have a practice of giving land at no cost to highway departments because it was felt that roads and highways bring economic development, and they do. But for whatever reason, and I don't know the reason for this, the commissioner at the time and what we would now call ADOT had a disagreement, and they took their disagreement to court, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court, and they said, the way we read this is the state trust has to be compensated in full at appraised value at the time of disposition. That means cash, not future consideration, not a ham sandwich today and I'll get you something better tomorrow. It means we have to get money when we sell our land. The other big case, and this came during my tenure here at the department, was Rumery v. Bayer, and that was when we were in the recession, and the state legislature tried to divert some of the money, saying, well, look, the state land department makes a lot of money every year. Let's try and take some of that and divert it to their operations. And the Arizona Supreme Court came back and said, nope, that's not the way it works. All that money has to go to the beneficiaries, and the state land department has to go to you, legislature, for their funding. So we had some past experiences with land planning that didn't go so well. Sometimes we didn't plan at all, and we got built around, as you see in the upper graphic there. So development all around us, but we don't have this particular piece of land, and I'm not going to call out where it is. This particular piece of land does not have infrastructure. It does not have access, even though it sits next to an interstate freeway. And so we basically have a stranded parcel of land here that one of my jobs is to figure out how we're going to get this thing activated. Or we would end up, as you see in the lower image there, where the planning would go on the private lands without consideration for what was going to happen on the trust land. So you have a circulation system in that proposed development that does not connect to the land around it and really doesn't have any, there's no cohesiveness there of the community plans that are being done. And so when we end up in things like this, there's a lot of pressure on us to just become de facto open space. And that is absolutely contrary to our charge as a fiduciary, because that means then we're not going to get the fair market value for that land. A lot of folks will ask us, well, what about the Urban Lands Act? That was something that happened here in Arizona about 30, 40 years ago. We put the Urban Lands Act in place, and that was the ability to plan land in advance and get repaid at the time of disposition. Well, we had some trouble with that too. And also with planned development zoning, which in different jurisdictions is known as PAD, PUD, or planned communities. The problem here is that those Urban Lands Act or planned development zoning schemes work very well if you could dispose all the land in one market cycle. But if you're going to be going over several market cycles, you need to have flexibility, because what was desired in one cycle might not be desired in the next. We have land in North Phoenix that has golf course and resort zoning on it nobody wants it today. So we're going to have to go back and take care of that. Planned development zoning, like the PUDs and PCDs I mentioned a moment ago, usually require a level of detail that we, as a landowning agency, really just aren't experienced enough to provide. We've made attempts at it in the past, and typically what happens is a potential buyer will come in and look at what we assumed a buyer would want, and they'll say, well, that's really nice, but we don't want any of that. So we're going to need to redo that, and we're going to want a discount on the price because of that. And so we learned that, first of all, we need to know what we don't know. And one of the things that we don't know is, what do developers want, and how do they do their business best? And so we've learned that we need to step back from that. And as I mentioned before, a lot of these Urban Land Act projects, if they weren't disposed in a single economic cycle, we ended up with obsolete land use plans, planned uses, design guidelines that reflected old design aesthetics. One of our bigger problems is the regulatory environment around drainage. The Clean Water Act, Section 404, we're left with basically what I would say anachronistic or relic 404 permits that don't match to what's being done today, but yet we still have them. And sometimes the infrastructure plans are wrong, because we might have planned for water and sewer usage that was common 30 years ago. And today, water usage and sewage generation is much lower than it was. So we have to go back and redo all of our plans, and that's also not doing our best job for our beneficiaries. So what we've come up with in this current cycle, and actually it started before the last recession, was we started looking at the use of planned development zoning, but deferring those details to the end user for secondary planning. So this would be suited for large-scale, long-term development projects, and it makes it so we're ready to hit the market at the time of demand. So we might have a bucket of uses, a zoning bank we call it, that a user could come and select uses from, because we've already gone through the zoning with the municipality and identified certain places where those uses can go on the property, or a collection of uses could go, and then allowing the user to select those at the time of auction. So basically what that means is we've already received city council approval at the time of the zoning, but then the user is going to then go get administrative approval for the site planning and for all of their detailed water, wastewater plans, amenities, paths, trails, wayfinding, etc. Things, again, that's not our wheelhouse. You know, if you ask me to go do wayfinding and signage, you're probably not going to be satisfied with the result. But there are people out there that do that very well for developers, and we'd like to let them do their best. So some examples of where we have done some of this flexible zoning and how it has worked well for us. Obviously, over there on the left-hand side of your screen is the project we're talking about today. We worked on this with the City of Phoenix and Alan's team over the last 6 months to provide flexible zoning for this 3,500 acres in the area that we call Biscuit Flats. And there, if you look at each of those different color areas, there is a collection of uses that can go in there, and those are then appropriate so that a user, if they want to go in that pink area along the freeway, they would go and say they want to do a hotel or an apartment building, they could go look down the list, find that. But you're not going to find hotels and apartment uses within those blue areas, because that's where our tech campus is going to be. So that's how that works. That's a very, very high level description. But then another example of that is over on the right-hand side of the screen, and this is over in the city of Scottsdale, just between Scottsdale and Pima Roads, where we have this flexible zoning in place for Crossroads East. It's a planned community, and we have utilized that flexible zoning to date to retain 2 major employers for the state of Arizona, and that's Nationwide Insurance, who are going to grow their presence there, and Axon Enterprise, who are going to do the same, moving out of dispersed, tight quarters, both of those companies. They were planning to take their business elsewhere, but we were able to retain them for Arizona and to let them grow in Arizona, which is great for all of us. So this is just a graphic of North Phoenix, and then the blue on that map is the state trust land. You can see the North Phoenix 3500 there, sort of in the middle of the screen. So I'm going to conclude just by saying there is a whole lot more to come here. And if you look at these areas, if you're familiar with this part of North Phoenix, you'll look at this and go, wow, most of the developable land, or most of the remaining land that's not developed yet today, is state trust land. So we have a long partnership ahead of us. And I think that this has been a great way to keep that partnership going, to get this project up and running. We've gotten our sea legs under us, and I think there is much, much more to come. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to Alan.
All right. Thank you, Mark. I am going to share my slides. Hopefully you guys can see them.
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay. All right. Let me get out. Screen 1 second. Sorry about that. All right. Hopefully you can see that now.
You'll want to switch your display settings, Alan.
Oh, they're not. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for having us. I did want to note real quick before I started to congratulate Sheila Harris. She just won a PCA award, the Phoenix Community Alliance, for her work with that group. So she won that. But she probably knew about it beforehand, but I just found out earlier today they had an online awards luncheon. So congratulations, Sheila. And so, as Mark said, this is just an aerial of the 3,500 acre site. This project was led by Christine Mackey out of our Community Economic Development Department. The Planning Development Department did play a very significant role in it, as we'll talk about a number of the aspects that were necessary to make it happen. But from an overall perspective, to make it happen, we had to have a general plan amendment, a zoning case to establish zoning on it, a modification to our infrastructure limit line. We had to have a IGA done with the state land department. We had to create a foreign trade zone in the area, and we also have a separate development agreement with TSMC, overall. So there have been a huge amount of moving parts to this thing over the last several months to get to the successful auction that we just had. So this is that 3,500 acre site for the zoning. And so this next slide here shows back in 1987, this is the plan that the city came up with for what was called our peripheral area C and D. A and B were way down the southwest part of the valley. That's now the 202 freeway, the Levine areas around down in the south side of Ahwatukee as well were those areas. And so that was the planning that was done. And you can see that even back in this time frame, we had recognized the need for employment uses, up at that Carefree Highway, I-17, intersection. That's what's shown as purple in this old area plan here. And so the other thing that the city has done, as Mark noted, because we have the majority of land area for the future of Phoenix up north is all state land. We have worked with them on phasing of some of that land area so that there's an orderly provision of infrastructure. And so there was a North Black Canyon Corridor plan that was adopted in the late 90s that did have a infrastructure limit line established to it to phase infrastructure so that it could be more affordable, so we could work with the state. They obviously want to maximize value to the trust and to the beneficiaries. And at the same time, as a city, we can't provide infrastructure all over, this area because it is substantial. Just the Biscuit Flats area, which is south of Carefree Highway and west of I-17 is 12,000 acres. And that doesn't, that's all west of I-17, nothing east and nothing north of Carefree Highway. And so from an infrastructure provision standpoint, we have to work together on those things. And so this infrastructure phasing overlay did have to be modified as part of the general plan as well back at that time. And so that was all taken forward. This was the most recent general plan. You can see that as technology came in, we modified the general plan to be blocks in lots of different colors compared to that 1987 plan that I showed at the beginning. But it does show that kind of how that long-term planning changes and takes place over time. And so what we ended up, with processing at the same time was that infrastructure phasing plan to modify that to allow this to develop. That's that red, circles you see around there. That's the modification of the line to include this particular area so that the city could participate, in providing infrastructure within, this area to some extent. And then also the crosshatch of commercial/commerce park from a general plan designation. So it reinforces that employment hub vision that we've had going back to the 80s, as well as maximizing the transportation investments that we have with the Loop 303, obviously now to the south, the I-17, Carefree Highway, which is State Route 74, for those of you that are not that familiar with this part of the valley. It also makes sure that we are respectful of the Ben Avery shooting range that is to the north. That facility has been there for a long time and they will continue to be there. And so we work with them to make sure that there is not any residential within that area. And you'd be looking at a half mile before you would see any multifamily. That would be the closest you would get to any kind of residential there in the future. So again, just the lay of the land in that area right here. And so the existing zoning was S1, which is our large lot, 1 acre lot zoning that really is a holding pattern for most developments. And then here's the PUD. And so as Mark said, this is in the city of Phoenix, we call it a PUD, planned unit development, where the developer, proposes their own zoning district and creates that through the entitlement process to allow for a project to go forward and have more of that flexibility. They do have to hire some consultants to do it, and I think with this PUD, it establishes that framework, and then the stipulations that we have that go with it in terms of second phase master planning, some of those things that, as Mark mentioned, the state wants to maximize some of that value to the trust, but them guessing about what exactly the market needs 5, 10, 20 years down the road doesn't do them any favors from the trust, doesn't do the city any favors either, because for example, the golf course zoning that he mentioned is in my city and has been there since the 1990s, and no one wants a 36-hole golf course, but yet that's what it's zoned for. And so we'll have to go through and amend that in the future, but then it becomes an issue with people who live around that area and being upset and not wanting other things. And so the PUD process does provide for some good flexibility to address some of those issues in the future. And then with the second phase master planning and working with whoever purchases the properties, in the future, that will allow us to, further refine what happens out there and make sure that it's something that the city desires to see, but at the same time, removes that uncertainty from a zoning perspective that, the buyers don't typically like with state land. So this is the land use mix. And so when Mark talks about there being a PUD and there being some flexibility associated with it, we have these different sub-districts here, the freeway mixed use, the technology campus, and then technology park are the three areas. And so there are different land uses and standards that are permitted within each of these areas. And so that's what is set up in the PUD, as well as complying with our requirements for development up north, like we have on similar projects up north, just like most cities, like Scottsdale and Peoria, we have evolved on our development standards. And so you're required to preserve more of the washes, have that natural desert look, and use only natural desert vegetation. All those kind of things are built into this as well, so that it will, from a development perspective, blend in with the rest of the North Black Canyon corridor development area, which is what we call the area east of I-17. So you see in terms of those different areas, here's the permitted uses, that are there. And so you can see this is just a breakout of the freeway commercial one. And so it's MUAC allows for multifamily residential, but the asterisk is telling you it's further away. It does allow for some automobile retail sales, prohibits single family residential, adult bookstores, pawn shops, those kinds of things. Your building height standards are there, building up to 220 feet maximum. If you meet kind of our mid-rise standards, which is more of a garden office style, not a downtown type of development where we allow much greater lot coverage. It's a smaller lot coverage, obviously, with the 30% open space, requirement that you have to have. This is the residential buffer, just showing what that is as it relates to making sure that we worked with the state Game and Fish Department, who owns Ben Avery Shooting Range, as we planned this, and worked with the state land department as well. Here is the technology park and the standards associated with that. So you've got the Commerce Park as our generally permitted uses, no residential permitted within those areas. They do 56 feet with a maximum height up to 80 feet with approval of a use permit. And they have 50% lot coverage and 10% open space. Within this area here, which is the technology campus, that is building height up to 80 feet with the ability to do 100 feet with the use permit, same lot coverage, open space standards. And then a portion of that can go up to 150 feet for a maximum of 100 acres. That evolved in the process as we were discussing things with TMC and their need to have some flexibility as it relates to the fabrication elements of their business that are evolving and changing, as we speak, and needing greater height inside of a building to make some of those things work in the future. So here's the character that we kind of talked about in terms of that North Black Canyon overlay district and our Carefree Highway Scenic Corridor. So all of those, requirements are built into the PUD and the second phase master planning, so that we're, letting people know not just, the current project with the auction that just happened, but also future, bidders of the state lands area. These are the things we expect and want to see. So that's communicated to them so they can think about that as they are preparing their bids and their projects and things they would like to propose in the area. But we're not so rigid about it that it is spelled out in a 20-page stipulated document where we're all trying to guess everything, 20 years down the road, when we just don't, we know we're not good at that from the state and the city's perspective as well. So it does establish that overall framework and has that character and compatibility with it. It will allow for the city to develop those destination employment uses that we want to have overall. The city does have an urban village model system where, we have 15 urban villages, and we want people to be able to try and find homes, find all of their, basic goods and necessities, as well as jobs within a village area, and minimize their, commute shed. Obviously, we don't rigorously control that. That's up to individuals. It's a free society to do all of that. We encourage that, but we want to make it from a planning perspective such that people can find those things and do that if they so desire to do that. And more people are choosing to do that because life is so busy and they just don't want to spend time, commuting as much as they used to. And not to do anymore with the pandemic, but someday that will be over. And, it is good to have these mix of uses. Since we're a 519 square mile city, we want to encourage all of those major things within each village area. So kind of what it will look like, here's a picture of the W.L. Gore, Phoenix campus. That is also, this is on the east side of I-17 up here. I imagine, what the conceptual ideas and things that we've discussed with them are looking something similar to this, albeit taller, and bigger because of what they do inside and what they manufacture, with the chips. But that's what it will look like by and large. You can see some of the renderings here. This is a research park picture from ASU. Same here. And those North Black Canyon Corridor Overlay District standards that I mentioned a couple minutes ago. So again, building in that framework of these are the requirements so that the public knows and can understand that lives out there today, they're going to get similar things. We're not giving away a blank check and letting everything happen, but they are going to have to meet these requirements, but we're not requiring as much detailed information up front. So that way we allow that flexibility of the end user to develop some master plans that the city gets to approve and work on with them, and then also refine their site plan and elevations to meet the city requirements and needs. I mentioned the master planning process. And so as part of that, master planning process, we did do, the state hired a consultant to do some conceptual, work as it relates to infrastructure. And these are the backbone infrastructure items, in terms of streets, in this case, and pedestrian circulation, but then it will form the background and backbone for the individual master plans that will come in for the different segments as the state sells them. And as they develop, we will work on, okay, here's your givens based upon, for example, whatever you're proposing. You need a minor collector that's going to connect these streets, and how does that happen? And all those types of details would take place, in that second phase, so that we can make sure we get what we want. But that way we're giving that flexibility that, the private sector really should have to develop a good project for everyone. So I don't want to spend a lot of time, going through all the stipulations, but you can see, here's the stipulations that we have associated with it in terms of big picture items like dedication of the right of way. We have had a conceptual traffic impact study, but we weren't requiring them, to provide and have it all approved up front, knowing that some of it's going to evolve as we move on. Then that way we can have it updated and get good information from the actual builders of the various projects. We did commit to a yearly update to the public to go back through the North Gateway Village Planning Committee, which is our village area for this, and give them an update on everything that's happening in the 3,500 acre area here as well. And then obviously flood control and trail issues and surrounding land uses. We do have a reference to the IGA that I mentioned, which is really about the assignment of water rights by the state land department to assign some of the water rights that they have to this area to serve the users of it and the overall development of it, because that was water that was supposed to come to the city when state land started developing their land areas within the city of Phoenix. And so now's the time to start doing that. That's what the IGA references. I want to go into a lot of details, but it really does provide the source of water to serve all of that area for the city of Phoenix. And it opens up that land for the state land department to work with potential bidders for other land in that Biscuit Flats area, which again is that south of Carefree Highway and west of I-17 down to the CAP is that blue line that's shown here on this next slide at the bottom, of the map. And so with that, this is just the general plan that we would anticipate seeing. You see the city of Phoenix going all the way over to basically the 69th, 75th Avenue alignment over there in portions that we share with Peoria. And so the bulk of this is residential, and we expect to develop that out with residential over time. We'll be working with the state land department to refine the area south of the 303 for more residential uses in the coming years, as well as working on that stuff up north as part of the 3,500 acre piece. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Mark, who is going to talk about the auction.
Great, thanks, Alan. I think you have the slides, so if you can just go one more forward. Okay. So the auction that was held last, I believe it was Wednesday the 9th at the Arizona Commerce Authority, this was a single bid auction, and it was one bid for $89 million. Now, the way we do our auctions is they are open cry bids. And so not as exciting as Barrett-Jackson, but the same idea that it's not a sealed bid auction. So we have a room full of folks that have signed up, brought their 10% down payment with them in the form of a cashier's check, so that we know that they have the money for the down payment. And then they get a paddle, and the auctioneer will stand at the podium and announce the auction, what's being sold, and we'll announce here is the opening bid, and we're going to go up in certain increments. And she'll simply ask for, does anybody want to make the opening bid? And so the bidder raises their paddle, states the amount of their bid, and that's recorded, and then we go forward. Does anybody wish to exceed that bid? Going once, twice, and then if there are no more, then that is the last and final bid, and we keep going until we get to that point. Now, sometimes it's one bid, one bidder. Other times, one of the auctions that was just prior to this one, and I'm looking at my other screen over here right now, we had an auction a couple weeks ago for some land out in the Apache Junction area that took 118 bids and went from $68 million to $245 million. So those are our favorite kind of auctions. In all of these auctions, we're going to get the minimum, we're going to get the appraised value, but we always want there to be, a competitive bid and several people in there, because again, if you watch Barrett-Jackson, then you know that you kind of get that, that excitement gets going and people keep raising their paddles, and that's where we really do the best job for our beneficiaries. And so there have been several auctions like that. I won't go into all of them, but generally, again, it's an open cry bid, and then when we reach the point that nobody wants to bid anymore, we're done. And then we congratulate them and give them a certificate of purchase. And with that, I think we are at questions and answers.
Thank you, Mark and Alan. That's been very informative. And for all of you on the call today or webinar, this is just an example of the interesting programs that are provided by LAI. And if you're interested in joining our local chapter or finding more about the organization, you can go to LAI at lai.org and find out more information. And we'd love to have you join us and become a member of the Phoenix chapter. We've had a couple questions come in, and one is in follow-up to Alan. You talked a little bit about the infrastructure that was needed in order to create this campus. And we had a question come in about meeting the needs of a tech campus, particularly with water and sewer, and how are we assured that those quantities of needed resources will be there? Can you answer that, please?
Sure. The city of Phoenix, with our water department, has been intricately involved in this. As a matter of fact, when we were working on trying to land TSMC, the Water Services Director and the Economic Development Director, along with the mayor, all went back to Taiwan to make pitches to land them. And that was because we knew that we do have the water resources if we could make it work with the state land department. So there's I don't want to get too much into water law agreements that I don't think the state land department of the city of Phoenix have truly decided, but we agreed for this project to work on it and move on. There was water that was assigned to the state land department as part of a 1920 agreement that talked about when the state lands that are in the northern part of Phoenix develop, the state land department would assign those water rights over to the city of Phoenix. And so that was necessary in order to serve this type of development up here on state land. And because this was a huge economic development project that was something driven by the governor's office as much as it was by the mayor and our economic and development department. It was the governor's office that was an integral force along with the state and their economic development arm were hand in hand through this the whole time with the state land department. And so all of those forces got together to make sure that the city could work out the IGA to have the water rights assigned so that we would know we have those water resources. And we do have a plant, the Lake Pleasant Water Treatment Plant, that is up and running and providing water up north. And so over time, they'll be tapping into that at first. And then over time, as North area grows, that facility has room to expand and the water to serve that.
Thanks. Are there any special needs for the treatment of the water once it's been used by a high-tech campus that maybe would be different or special as compared to general development?
They do treat their water and do things afterwards that they will have to do before it goes back and enters into the city system. I don't know all the details of those, but they will take care of that on their side and make sure that we're getting back good water from there.
How was it determined that there should be a tech campus? How did that decision-making process occur?
Well, it was part of the discussion that we wanted to see what we had wanted to have happen up there, with that being an employment center, and wanting to make sure that the city is divesting our economic development portfolio, so that we're not just focused only on downtown and ASU and biomed. Those are all great things that are happening. We continue to be a big focus for the city, but we also want to expand those things through other parts of the city. And our economic development department has had a focus on the technology corridor and growing technology jobs here in the city for a number of years now. And so when this opportunity came up, there was this site as well as another site in Phoenix that were the top two that they were looking at. And we were able to, then work, because we knew we wanted employment, and worked with, the user to figure out how we would lay that out with them, and came up with the zoning scheme and the things that we wanted to make it work with them.
It sounds like you've had a very cooperative relationship in getting to this point. Maybe you could speak a little bit about that, and also give us some insights into the decision-making with regards to selling such a large portion of land at this particular point in time. What went into the thought process of selling 1,800 acres or more that we've seen in the slides that you've shared with us? We'd be curious as to how that all came about.
So I'll go ahead and I'll take this one. It was 1,100 acres was the sale area, so just a hair over 1,100 acres. And it was our understanding that this was the amount of land that we need to support the uses that we were planning for this area. And so to have a technology hub that could support a 3,500 acre employment center, that the initial disposition would need to be around 1,100 acres. So that's what we have here. And I'm sorry, I think the first part of the question was, oh, I remember now, cooperation. Well, obviously, I think that with the bulk of the remaining developable land in North Phoenix being state trust land, and the fact that so much of the land within the city of Phoenix is state trust, I'd say we have a very good working relationship. We meet on a monthly basis formally. We meet much more often on specific projects. We interact quite a bit, and so I'm probably a fairly familiar presence down at City Hall, and a lot of the city folks are familiar presences around here at the land department. So it's just a very fluid and I would say very organic working relationship between the two entities that has worked out very well for both of us.
Alan, would you like to add anything?
No, I think Mark hit the nail on the head with that one. Really, we've known for a while that that's our future growth up north, and so we work really hard to maintain a good relationship, with them and work in partnership to do things. Because if we don't, they're still going to sell land. Whoever they sell it to is going to have to come in and work with us, and it's just going to make the process all the more difficult than if we could work together to find some mutually agreeable, means to get things done. Doesn't mean we always agree, but we do work it out to where we get to a point of, yeah, we can live with that and we can live with that. That makes sense. And then we go forward. And that's worked really well for us for the last several years, in general. And I think had it not been for that kind of relationship, I'm not sure we would have got through this, effort, because it was so intense, and there was so many moving parts associated with it, with lots of interest from the governor's office, from the mayor, on down. That if we didn't have that good working relationship as a base, it would have been a lot harder to get this done in the time frame that we had, because it was very short.
Can you give us hints as to what we might be expecting next that might be coming up? Land for sale or other developments that you have in the pipeline, other areas of interest?
I can look over to the area on the east side of Desert Ridge, between the currently developed part of Desert Ridge and Scottsdale Road, where the city of Scottsdale boundary lies. There's a very large floodplain over there, the Rawhide Wash floodplain, and we have been working diligently, State Land Department and the City of Phoenix and the Flood Control District of Maricopa County have been working very diligently for several years now to obtain a solution to the Rawhide Wash flooding. It's an alluvial fan. It's very unpredictable and very hazardous to develop in that area. Not impossible, but hazardous and expensive to develop. And so we are working on a solution that I just got a notice today that looks like we're getting closer to an intergovernmental agreement between the city and the Flood Control District. So I think that that's going to be our next big thing. It may not happen for a few years because we still have to build that flood control solution and we have to go work on the entitlements for that land. But I think that we and the city, based on some sessions that I was in with Alan and some of his village planning committee folks, so about 3 or 4 years ago, almost everybody in that session identified that area near on the east side of Desert Ridge along the 101 freeway as being what they thought would be the next big employment center for the city of Phoenix. Of course, that was before this, but I still think that there is tremendous opportunity up there, and that's where I'm going to be spending an awful lot of my time over the next few years.
Great. That's an insight we didn't know. Thank you for sharing. That is the conclusion of the questions that we have. I just want to remind everyone, if you're interested in more information about LAI, go to LAI.org. This session has been recorded, and all of you that participated today will get a link. If you want to go back and do this session again, you can do that. I also want to remind you that we have a webinar coming up on January 22nd. This is an international webinar on the impact of wealth creation. You may want to join us for that. And then one I know that many of you here in the Phoenix chapter will be interested in is on January 27th, Elliot Pollock will be joining us for his economic forecast for 2021. So that should be of great interest. I'm Sheila Harris. I'm the International President of LAI. I thank you for joining us today, and have a safe and happy holiday and stay COVID-free. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.